124. I forgot what I titled this one, which is pretty bad, but I think I titled it Cyber because that's Donald Trump's favorite word, cyber, which I guess we can talk about that in the after show where it's a little bit less public. But we're here tonight with Alex Bass of Cyberbytes Inc. and Blaze over at Crackberry. How you both doing tonight, gentlemen?
Pretty good. Recovering from a cold.
I'm alright. I'm laughing at Alex because he was like, before we went on air, he's like, if I cover my mouth like this, can you guys hear me cough? And I'm like, no.
It's kind of an interesting week. One of the lighter ones we've had, we're light on cast and crew. Scott's actually out of town. I think he'll be back December 7th, if I believe. But just to kind of preface this whole podcast, I think we need to... Blaze needs to reiterate his DTEC 70 thread on Crackberry about the hypervisor PB11. Just please stop. Please stop. It was funny the first couple of times, 2 weeks ago, but now it's just too much. If you don't know what we're talking about, good. Let's keep it that way. Otherwise, definitely check out Blaze's thread disavowing more or less this hypervisor idea and some just things that have been floating around online in terms of assets. But similarly to Alex's cold, seems like AT&T's actually gotten around to this no service bug that it was getting on its Priv devices. Blaze, is this it seems more of a BlackBerry side fix more than an AT&T side fix. I guess I'm kind of wondering who really messed up here to cause these types of issues to happen? Is it a hardware thing, carrier thing, or maybe both kind of share a little bit of blame as to this type of service outage?
I think they both share the blame on that one, but it's definitely something that came along. I mean, forward facing, it looks as though that it is strictly a BlackBerry fix, but we don't know what AT&T did on their actual network either, right? So, you download the APK or whatever it is and run it on your device, and it will fix whatever ails the situation. But I think they both share the blame in the length of time it took to go ahead and get it corrected.
In the length of time it took that to get corrected, I jumped onto a Samsung, right? That's how long and arduous it was for a lot of people out there. And again, that's an isolated incident just on one carrier in the United States. It doesn't speak to Priv kind of on a global scale, but at least the fix is out. BlackBerry's got that issued. So if you are for some reason still having issues with your Priv, you can grab the update. Crackberry's got the details on that.
Yeah.
John Chen discusses transaction, which I thought was interesting, Alex. I guess you want to go back to the AT&T
Yes, I do.
stuff.
Of course. This it was such a long thing that we can't just okay, here's how you fix it and just sweep it under the rug. No, my aunt was in touch with BlackBerry support for a while, and they were actually literally calling her on a daily basis at this point, trying to give her updates. So they told her that the phone was fixed, and they tried to go through and help her install this. And my aunt starts frantically calling me and trying to loop me into the conversation because the BlackBerry person was under the impression that I installed something on her phone. You know how the Priv has that Lookout APK installer, Lookout? It's called Lookout, I think, whatever.
Yeah.
It's installed by default.
Every Android OEM has that installed.
Yeah. But so the BlackBerry representative thought that I installed it on her phone, and it wasn't allowing her to install this, LTE CA bug fix.apk. I think it was saying it was a virus or whatever. So BlackBerry is blaming it on me when it's come on, every single Android phone has this installed for the most part, and you guys default so this whole big mess. And I think things are all right. She's not getting great service. Ironically, last night I was helping out a client, and my Pixel ran out of service for a solid 5 minutes at a very inopportune time. So I'm kind of getting the feeling part of this is just AT&T with with their coverage, but maybe just unlucky. I don't know.
For those listening, that is as close to as a bad thing Alex has ever said about his Pixel. That's as close as it gets. Oh man. John Chen did this Bloomberg. Was it Bloomberg even? John Chen discussed basically the Trump election, and why those questions were even being brought up I thought was kind of interesting. But nonetheless, I did find
Wow.
it rather
I
interesting
mean,
that we
you have
had.
Giuliani running with them like
Uh,
at the security summit, so it's not exactly invalid questions, but it's kind of
and
crazy.
John Chen's a registered Republican as well, so it
Yeah.
is rather interesting. So some of his thoughts there were, I think, really sobering, and I think as an American personally, that some of the things that he's more or less said is that Trump can go ahead and bring around a good group of people who can get the job done, right? Kind of as he's done his whole career, and if they are true to a platform of basically less government, more business, that it could potentially be good for the sector, technology included. Although, there's those silly headlines that you read that Trump's never used a computer or whatever the case may be. So it's just kind of funny to hear John Chen, such a respected CEO, speak on those issues and do it in a way that doesn't, it doesn't elicit any kind of rhetoric really. It's just kind of his thoughts. And I thought it was really interesting to hear. And when I hear that conversation lined up with, this BlackBerry in-house QWERTY that I promised you guys, basically what he said, I just thought it was a really poignant conversation for the time. Did either of you two check out that video? What were your thoughts on that interview?
I don't know. It was an interest. I mean, let's be honest. I skipped all the Trump stuff because I really just genuinely don't care, and I'm tired of hearing about Trump. So I skipped over the majority of that. I took some of it in. I'm just like, whatever, bro.
See, when Blaze got his priv, that's the privilege he wanted, right? To not have to hear this in his ear. And the elections are long, so yeah, I feel the same way. It's a little much. But about the things, John Chen did have to say about BlackBerry, not really new stuff, but kind of fresher to the ear, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, what I got out of the conversation was a little bit of clarification, because for the past little while there's been a lot of mixed messages regarding that actual device. Because if you look at the actual timeline of the conversation for that device itself, it was like John Chen talked about it, Alex Thurber talked about it, then Marty Beard talked about it, and it all sounded as though that they all had different stories as to what they were trying to relay to people. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there was no cohesiveness across the board when it came to what that would be. And I mean, realistically, when it comes down to it, John Chen basically said the exact same thing that he said previously, but he's the CEO. Who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe Marty Beard, Alex Thurber, or are you going to believe John Chen? I mean, it's kind of questionable as to who you actually want to believe, because some people would say that John is a liar, but
I believe the investors.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe whatever Chen says is probably the sticking order, I guess you could say. And whatever happened between the messages between, Alex Thurber and Marty Beard, maybe things changed in between that time. Maybe situations evolved or, fell apart. But either way, the end result is that BlackBerry still has an in-house QWERTY keyboard design device coming out. So, we'll see how that works out.
That Alex has zero interest in, because it doesn't run new. And it's funny because we're talking about timelines and things, and a lot of what I want to touch on the after show is more of that kind of side of the conversation about what the future of Android is looking like now that the Pixel is out and these phones, and what BlackBerry's competitive advantage really has to be for them to drive forward. I mean, I'm using this Edge, and I'm trying to use all BlackBerry software, and for the most part, I'm really enjoying it. And it's like I have a piece of hardware that does what it needs to do, right? Hits the spec line that I wanted, but then I have all the BlackBerry type things, and it's like it's pretty close to what you're going to get on something like a D-Tech 50 or 60 or even a Priv. So I guess even for BlackBerry, the line that they're drawing right now, in terms of what their hardware to software kind of setup is going to be, is very interesting, because I think we're all kind of on the same wavelength that whether BlackBerry sells a phone or not is not really their primary motive. It's really, can I get my software into someone's hands one way or another? And maybe these types of promotions and things are really what their marketing should be, as that platform continues to grow, because you can bring it down to, these 3 devices championing these 3 types of features or whatever. But if they can just talk about a larger conversation, similarly how they did in the in the Washington Post and whatnot, and say, hey, we are a software company, and then start explaining in detail kind of what that is, seems to make more sense. In terms of this QWERTY in-house device that may come through, we've seen obviously in the benchmarks and things that it could potentially be running on Nougat if it's not already being tested on it. So do you think we're going to have to wait until this next device to kind of get Nougat out for all, or are we going to see it maybe roll through a beta program at some point, be it late December, early January? Because I'd be interested to see, what they're capable of to actually bring that out in a timely manner.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a no-brainer to put it through a beta program. Even like Samsung went ahead and they have a beta program for that as well. And realistically, it does suck. They're probably going to wait for a device to fully roll out Nougat. That seems just the way that a lot of manufacturers like to do it, and it makes sense. So it's like if you buy the new device, you get essentially Nougat or the newest release, and for everyone else, you maybe have to wait a month or maybe a month and a half, 2 months. So it definitely makes sense, but it's a no-brainer for them to just do a beta. You have to have a BlackBerry ID. You have to be within beta zone, and like, why not do that? They should be doing it.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn because I feel there's a big lag that's happening.
Yeah.
Either way. It's like I would like to get these updates faster, but we really just don't know. And maybe that's what I want to know, right? Maybe that's the question, the answer to my question. But I'd really love to know, like, well, what are you doing to Android BlackBerry? Like, what's taking so long? Is it, other factors with your distribution partners and that takes a lot more of the time, or is it the engineering to add your security layers in? I think that's kind of the oversight that I'd like to see. But nonetheless, even with these distribution partners, we see them continuing to push forward. Blaze, he was able to post out on Crackberry that Verizon actually is now officially rolling out Marshmallow to Priv owners. Right, like hallelujah, the bells are.
I'm actually really glad for the Verizon customers, just so that they at
Yeah.
least have a little bit of a better experience. I mean, it's been a long time coming, and obviously it took way longer than what it should have in most people's eyes, but, it's here now, and,
Yeah. I feel like Marshmallow's like Lollipop 5.5 almost, It's almost like a massive fix of the mess that Lollipop was for a lot of people out there. I'm just thinking here to myself, guys, like if they were really, really focused, I just wonder what the scheduling is of all of this. Like, it doesn't seem to really line up in a cohesive manner, or that maybe BlackBerry just doesn't have a lot of control over how these updates go. But it seems like a lot of carriers want to be testing like the same OS across different manufacturers at the same time. So just the way the lineup seems, it's like in the United States, Samsung devices will probably get Nougat at the beginning of next year, like April, March. And I can see BlackBerry bringing Nougat kind of around the same time. And it's almost like all the carriers kind of want to knock it out in one fell swoop, as opposed to kind of going at the rate that the actual OEM is going at. So just kind of interesting to see. And maybe it has even more to do with just the software on chip, or the system on chip that's on these devices, as opposed to some of the larger aspects there. But yeah, Blaze, you summed it up pretty well. Verizon owners, we can only be happy for you. I feel like Priv on Marshmallow is a much nicer experience than the Lollipop one.
Yeah.
And there's nothing really we're waiting on at this point. Now that I think about it, in the carrier space, we're not waiting on any updates or anything like that anymore. I mean, even the unlocked AT&Ts that were being sold, those devices are getting those updates straight from BlackBerry too. So it kind of is cool to get everybody on the same playing field in terms of this conversation. The larger global conversation that's going on now is that the DTEC 50 and 60 are going to be announced in India through a new partner that was announced. Thought this was kind of interesting, but I'm leery on the price point. I don't know if Blaze, you did the conversion, or Alex, you took a look at it, but it's still pretty expensive there. Like, it seems more expensive than it is here in the States. And I don't know if that's the import taxes kind of being added in there, but hopefully they got a strategy, go-to-market strategy for that, because I think it's a little bit overpriced for that market. Even both the devices, really.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably a little bit overpriced as well. I mean, all you have to do is just look at the comments from people who are actually in India and saying that they're not going to buy the device because of what they can buy comparatively. Now, I don't necessarily agree with some of the comparisons, but that that's not up to me. That's the landscape that BlackBerry has to deal with. And if those comparisons are being made just simply based off of price alone, then that should be, a consideration for BlackBerry within that market, especially when it comes down to the fact that they're saying that India is a big market for us, and we're going to continue to move forward, especially like with the distribution deals and stuff like that are happening. I mean, there's the rumor that they're getting ready to essentially go ahead and announce additional deals with the distribution partner that they lined up for the DTEC 50 and the DTEC 60. If that's going to be the case and they're going to continue to push within India, then they really need to look at the strategy in terms of pricing and see what they can do to make it better within that region, so that it's just not all for naught. Like, if you're going to have that market and you're going to try and lead in that market, then you also have to be comparatively priced within that market for it to even matter. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time, right?
It really is kind of perplexing. Like, if I'm BlackBerry in India and I know the history that my brand has had, do I try to bait consumers, or do I hone in on those enterprise users that I could potentially have in the region? And I wonder kind of how that thought process goes. To close, in your article, you're taking a quote, and it says, "As we implement a new strategic direction in our mobility solutions business, we will continue to leverage third parties to distribute and market BlackBerry handsets." So in this new partnership, we can imagine a lot of that distribution and marketing is going to be done by someone else. The costs are going to be elsewhere. So maybe potentially in these types of deals, the cost is raised a little bit so that both parties kind of get more skin in the game. And again, a lot of oversight on what that may look like. But I think Blaze is absolutely correct. They have to work on getting closer to where the people really are in terms of their spending to be able to really push a device like this, especially DTEC 60. Like DTEC 50, there's just so many cheaper options of Android in that region of the world. So it's tough. What else do we have on our topic list, guys? I'm going through it right now. We're making good time. The only other thing that I really talked about in terms of our topic list was that Hub Plus services has been available for Android devices. And I just found it kind of interesting as I transition it on this device. Like, I know Alex probably isn't going to give much BlackBerry software a chance, but do you still use like the BlackBerry Calendar, Alex? Is that something you use on your Pixel?
Yeah, I mean, the BlackBerry Calendar is like pretty much the one main no-brainer for me. I have meeting mode automatically turned on because we're on the podcast right now. I still haven't found an adequate solution for that on Android aside from the BlackBerry Calendar. There's the baked-in solution that puts it on Do Not Disturb, but I can't set it so it's like a Do Not Disturb that's vibrate only, because I like having the vibrate there versus a fully Do Not Disturb. I don't know. I'm still going to use... I can't not use BlackBerry Calendar just for that feature alone, which shows, to a point, the productivity that I still love about BlackBerry, that I can't not use them because, there's no other alternatives, at least for me.
Yeah, on my S7, I've been feeling a lot of the same things where it's like these apps are just more productive than what I would be using otherwise. And I didn't install all of them, and I put up a post on BerryFlow in our portfolio section about how to get Hub Plus services. And basically, you go subscribe to Hub Plus services, but then if you want to get that keyboard, Cobalt has a little workaround that you can get. And maybe not the best thing to promote, but I do think it's kind of cool because BlackBerry doesn't actually have a solution for me to go give them my money for that product. But it is still available. And like, I can't use BlackBerry software without the keyboard almost. It feels like an unholy circle, so to speak. And Alex, I know you probably use like the Google keyboard or something else right now, correct?
Yeah.
So, well, what features in the Google keyboard did you appreciate that held you against, downloading the BlackBerry keyboard and going to put it on your Pixel?
Realistically, I've just kind of... gotten no,
He's just a hater. Yeah, that's what.
no, I gotten used to the little things, which BlackBerry they have some equivalents to it. So like on the space bar, if you slide left and right, it moves the cursor left and right. Which the BlackBerry keyboard, you
Yes.
have the tapping left and tapping right, the directional icons sometimes that show up. Swiping backwards over the delete key allows real. I don't know. Did they actually do any? I think they may have added this to the BlackBerry keyboard. But so I like using swipe, but I do also like the swiping to delete. And on
Yeah,
BlackBerry
they
keyboard, you
added
can't
that.
have both. Did they did add that then?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, there's very few things. One thing I have gotten used to is you can set it so instead of doing uppercase, if you hold down the letter, you can do a symbol. So like if I hold my finger over N for a second, it just says exclamation point versus a capital N. I if I could do that, then I would probably switch to the BlackBerry keyboard. It's just a matter of like I've gotten used to that. It's something so little and stupid, but just holding down because I never hold down to do a capital letter. Like I never use that. I don't care about that. So adding
Yeah.
one
Because
different
you're not a
layer.
passport user.
Yeah. Hey, I had a passport for a couple months.
It was nice on passport because you didn't have to do any touch screen. You know, you could just
Yeah.
hold the
Yeah.
letter and boom, you had your capital. That's where I got used to even typing that way, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So nothing else. Just the BlackBerry calendars holding out. I want to go through like what's in the Hub Plus subscription because a lot of people actually think that it's got the DTech app and it doesn't. And you'd think that's like BlackBerry's premier Android app that's something that would be there, but it almost doesn't make sense for DTech to be available because it ties so closely into the security system that BlackBerry themselves distribute. So you get calendar, contacts, Hub, which is awesome, keyboard, the launcher, notes, BlackBerry
keyboard, do you?
I'm looking actually at the little workaround right now. So not the key,
You're talking
not
about
not
the solution.
yeah, not the keyboard. The BlackBerry Notes, Password Keeper, Tasks, and then BlackBerry Transfer. So you get a pretty broad spectrum of the BlackBerry offerings. But one of the things that Alex and I have discussed is that it gets really tough to be competitive with that type of offering. It's like Google Keep is going to be a better Tasks and Notes because it's just more developed. Password Keeper, as great as it is, the fact that it syncs with your BBID, that you can do secure notes and a bunch of other things is great. But then there's systems like LastPass that work across mobile devices, across laptops, and the like.
Like
There's
I don't use Password Keeper. I use 1Password because I have it on my desktop. I have it on my Android device. I have it on my iOS device, and I don't need to worry about it. Like no matter what device I pick up or where I'm headed, I always have my passwords with me.
Yeah.
And that's a drawback for
Password
Keeper on BlackBerry, especially the whole desktop aspect of it all. Like I really wish that BlackBerry would focus a lot more concentration on sort of like desktop solutions. Like I'm not gonna go into beating down the BlackBerry blend dead horse, but I mean just like common things that are simple. Like why don't I have my notes app on my desktop? Like why don't I have like a calendar integration on? Well, calendar is a bad example because it does. But why don't I have my password keeper on there, right? Like those would be great implementations. Hell, I would even appreciate if there was like a cloud backup service for password keeper. There's no cloud backup service for password keeper. I need to import and export them in order to move devices or wipe devices and stuff like that. It's it's less than what it needs to be. It could be so much more.
And that pacing is part of why I'm hesitant to like fully envelop myself in these Android devices BlackBerry themselves are putting out, because you get great services. I mean, you're basically getting a very, very close to vanilla type Android experience, which is actually like unheard of today because everybody else is doing kind of their own flair. So to get something that's very minimal and close to vanilla, especially post Nexus, is actually kind of refreshing. But you got to understand that you have to supplement a lot of that experience. Something I'm seeing here on the S7 is that like I can use the BlackBerry Hub application, right? And I can slide down, hit Open Calendar, and it can launch any calendar, right? It doesn't have to be the BlackBerry calendar. So if I had a Microsoft calendar experience, or I was using, the one that came stock on the phone, the BlackBerry Hub Plus services work really well to kind of just work as a layer in between everything else. And I was kind of surprised at that it doesn't feel misplaced on a non-BlackBerry device. And I thought that's really something that would happen, that it would feel like, it doesn't really work well together, to keep. But because each service is kind of like standalone in its own sense, it's actually quite nice to have it there as a layer. Even if you only interact like Alex does with one or two apps, it is still nice to have because it is, it's its own little mini platform that you can load onto your phone. I'm really interested to see if they can get something on iOS, because if they can nail an iOS implementation, I think that will be pretty substantial for them. But iOS is also a nightmare in terms of the notification systems and whatnot, so it's definitely tough. If you're interested in getting the BlackBerry keyboard or any other of those BlackBerry applications, check out Hub Plus services in the Google Play Store. And otherwise, check out Crackberry, hit up Cobalt's website, and you'll be able to get some of those other additions in there as well. I want to switch to some of our Patreon questions here, and then we'll jump into our after show. And before we jump on our after show, I will unbox this thing that I got in the mail. We're going to see what this is all about. Although Blaze says he knows already, which that's... Blaze is like, I read the BerryFlow BBM group. I'm like, Alex.
I creep in groups, man.
Yeah, you're lurking in the back. Yeah, for sure. So let's jump over to the Patreon. I'm actually, every time I'm reading these Patreon questions, I'm using the BBM desktop channel manager because it allows me, we're talking about needing web components. Like, I would not be using channels if there wasn't a web client. Like, I just could not do it, And Blaze probably even more so with what you're doing over at Crackberry. Like, without the desktop solution, BBM channels is like...
Yeah, there's actually a huge backstory to that, but...
We have the after show. We'll go into it.
Yeah.
We have it's. I think I remember this issue. We talked about it in the past, and that is a heavy conversation. The patrons asked on 124 just a couple of light items that we've kind of already covered. So, Nick says, "What is the relationship between BlackBerry and I think Folia is the company name, like a collaboration tool more or less." A press release kind of went out, and even Folia did something about it, really just tying in an enterprise service with the MDM platform that BlackBerry has. It seems just kind of like a mutually beneficial thing. BlackBerry has done this in the past, basically bringing on services and becoming a reseller of those services through their platform. So I think that's pretty cool to see. This is a question I'll float out to you guys. Alex, you having been on Verizon in the past, why the sudden change in Verizon releasing Marshmallow when everyone thought it was stuck on Lollipop? BlackBerry muscle? ? Kind of an interesting question. Like, what do you think were the real contributing factors behind Marshmallow even coming out? Do you think it was BlackBerry maybe muscling and kind of saying, "Hey guys, like, what's up?" Like, or is it just Verizon being Verizon?
No, I guess that's the weird thing. I'm seeing, like, you look at a company like Verizon. I was on them before, and I was frustrated because a new phone would come out. I think the Priv, right? It came to AT&T first, and like that was the reason that we switched over to AT&T. So it's like, okay, Verizon does not care about BlackBerry, so entire family switched over to AT&T, and then it's like it's weird because like the Pixel and stuff like that comes out exclusive to Verizon, and now Verizon's they're doing some updates and things like that, but they still don't care about BlackBerry. So I think it's just Verizon being Verizon. And I feel like, like all it really had to take at a certain point was like BlackBerry going and then be like, all right, like I understand you guys don't care about us, but it's like this.
We understand you just launched the Pixel as an exclusive.
Yeah,
but...
it's like seriously though, you're gonna make people want to move off your service to like it's such a simple thing to push out that like why not just do it? I wonder if like this no service problem was something within Marshmallow, and that delayed it at all, or because it was an APK that they pushed out to fix it, right? So like I wonder if that problem didn't exist, and I wonder if it was solely AT&T or possibly could have happened to Verizon.
When I spoke with AT&T, they told me that BlackBerry told me, which when you're getting it third hand already, you got to take it with a grain of salt, of course. But they told me it was a multi-carrier issue that BlackBerry was aware of, that it wasn't isolated to AT&T. So whatever stake that has, it's just interesting to hear. Another question that we had here: since DTEC 60 isn't offered through carriers in the United States, is there anything hindering BlackBerry from releasing a nougat update? Blaze, why don't you take that one?
No, there's nothing. I mean, they can go ahead and release the nougat update whenever the hell they want, but the only thing hindering them at this point would be the amount of employees that they have working on it to be able to go ahead and making sure that it's all good to go.
Thank you.
And it's kind of funny that you mentioned that because I hadn't thought about it before, but yeah, that potentially has a really good impact on how soon or how late that we actually end up, or at least some BlackBerry users, specifically DTEC 60 users, end up with nougat. Because, I mean, that technically, if you wanted to look at it, BlackBerry could roll out nougat to, unfortunately for some, the DTEC 60 before they ever even roll it out to like Priv or DTEC, even the DTEC 50, right? So, I don't know. That's an interesting scenario. I love these questions because they bring up certain scenarios that I didn't think of.
Yeah, that question was from Israel. I'm thinking here as well that people need to understand, like right now, if this is a list of the things BlackBerry cares about, at the top of that list is not nougat. It's not a smartphone even. Smartphones are down here. So like, yeah, there's nothing hindering them, but their entire focus is not here. It's elsewhere in terms of building out the rest of these deals that they've got going on, and smartphones are super important, but they're really probably much more focused on the security of all those layers going on. Sean asks here, very interested in your BlackBerry / Samsung experience. I don't want to drone on about it, to be quite honest, but Sean, it's good. I mean, the specs are similar to a DTEC 60, so I'm using it, and it's more of an experiment more than a cheating on my girl type thing with BlackBerry. It's more, I just want to see what it's all about, because if these apps are going to be the spearhead for BlackBerry into the future, I worry about the rate of which they can actually stay. Like how long is it till the one feature Alex likes in the calendar app taken by a service he prefers? It's things like that worry me. And I find myself using the services and saying, well, there's actually not a lot of things I'm missing here. Like there's things that I thought maybe a little bit more BlackBerry specific, but I mean, all the shortcuts are here from the launcher. I have the pop-up widgets. I don't have the productivity tab, but I have Samsung's version thereof. So it's been pretty good so far. I'm waiting to see if they keep putting the pedal to the metal, so to speak, on what they're doing on their Android effort. Like, it's tough because like I can't get the BlackBerry camera on my Samsung, and that's something I really like. Like, I like their camera UI and things like that. So it's interesting because we're only getting a small portion of what BlackBerry's real software image is on these devices. And if I were to put DTEC 60 next to my Edge, I'm sure the DTEC 60 would probably perform better because it is kind of wrapped under BlackBerry's umbrella. So more to report on that, I suppose. Waldo says, I did watch the whole interview with John Chen. I was surprised at his connection with the GOP. When he said it was a disaster, I thought he was talking about the DTEC 60. I guess it was not following the bouncing ball to realize that he was talking about Trump. Considering the support the U.S. government gives BlackBerry, do you think that this was a wise comment? And Blaze, I think you kind of would agree with me on this, that when John Chen speaks in those types of manners, he's being very candid, but he's also trying to not be too heavy in terms of his sentiment. He's trying to make it lighthearted and a little bit, off the cuff, so to speak. I don't think John Chen, when he speaks often, is speaking, with all his cards out on the table ever. You know what I'm saying?
Never.
So everything he says is calculated, or within the confines. Unlike some of the things we got from our presidential elects here in America, right? Not so off the cuff, but definitely interesting once you make that connection to realize there is more going on. And that cyber conversation is one I really want to hold in our after show, because there is more of the sentiment out there. Waldo's second question is, sentiment in Canada was very strong one way. So don't take that last compliment as an endorsement of the win. It's kind of a little caveat on that last one. Let's jump into our after show, gentlemen. If you're interested in checking out the Upstream after show, you can hit us up on berryflow.com/Patreon. I honestly feel, at least lately, that like the after show is the more the more interesting conversation to a degree because we pull back and we can kind of talk about those topics that maybe we don't want to float out there so readily, live on YouTube for anyone to see. So definitely consider checking us out there if you're interested in what we've got to say. Some things I want to talk about are a little bit more of Android, Nougat, and the fragmentation that we're having with devices like Pixel and how that affects BlackBerry, and also about what potentially a new president-elect can also do in terms of the focus of the economy and overall global corporate security. Definitely some interesting stuff ahead. Wrap it up here, Alex.
All right, sounds good. I will talk to you guys in a little bit. Hope to see you other guys there. Later.
Peace.